Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Westworld. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Okay. So there's that thing at the beginning I really liked where it's like Musashi is, gets a call from hell. I like that because obviously she's alive and we see her skin looks a little better, but I like you can still see cracks, so it's not completely fixed. Basically, it's like, you're glad I'm alive and everything, but the fact of the matter is Dolores doesn't care about any of us dying, so it's like whatever part of the plan you had, I'm actually streamlining it. So I guess she's basically saying like she's removing all the other Doloreses and just kind of putting herself in play here, which is so interesting that Dolores's undoing will be done in by another Dolores. It's just the irony behind the whole situation. But it's like, oh yeah, because of that, I revealed your location to someone else, and lo and behold, one of the people that Maeve brought back, none other than Clementine. And I don't know why I didn't guess have like, of course you bring back Clementine. Side note, gotta point out, it's OG Clementines. You have to remember that there was the other Clementine that that was replaced by her, that was played by Lily Simmons. I was blanking on her name for a second, but Lily Simmons became like the new Clementine. But we got OG Clementine back. I thought that was interesting. And he was like, oh, like you and Maeve has such, history of selling yourselves. I thought you would have sold yourself. And she's like, Maeve's not for sale and neither am I. It's like, basically, we're here basically because of your plans and everything. And it turns into a gunfight. Clementine going all badass like that. But it's not just her alone. Someone else pops up. I was like, ooh, who is it? At first I was like, is that Sakura Akane? Akane? It's like, no, it's the lady that went with them when they left that area of the park. And I was like, oh. And she was like, yeah, you disgraced Musashi because he was a good guy, and just stabbed into him and then turned around with the blade still inside him and took his head off. So, that's where the thing is. So now they have that Dolores, because it makes up for the one that Charlotte Dolores took, the one that was inside of Connell. So, which we still don't know what's up with that one. I mean, because she's streamlining things, she might have destroyed him just because it's like, well, because the last thing she wants is Sirach to have him, but at the same time, it just like less of them running around. It might turn into a thing of like, oh, Dolores, you're no longer necessary. I'll be the only Dolores that exists. I'll become my own person, which is once again the irony behind the whole situation of she created versions of herself. Like, it's all about freedom and stuff like that, but in a sense you force all these other people, they're copies of you, but they're kind of their own individual selves. But the one inside of Charlotte is the one that seems the most like that's gained her own independence, that's kind of gained her own personality. She's found something to live and fight for other than just Dolores' calls. She was the one that seemed like the least like it took a second to kind of like readjust. Like, she seemed the most kind of like losing herself, because none of the others seem to have like gone through what the one in Charlotte has. So it's such a fascinating situation. But nevertheless, you have Dolores, OG Dolores with Caleb, and obviously she's filled him in because like the place they're in was it Sonora, Mexico. It's like, oh yeah, she's like, it reminds her of home, and he's like, you mean Westworld? And then it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess it was probably public enough news, even when Delos wanted to keep that shit super quiet, it was public enough news, the massacre that happened at Westworld. He was like, was that you? And it's like, partly her, but mainly her it was, so I thought that was all kind of, fascinating. But the whole thing is for Dolores, it's all about, trying to make sure her species survives and stuff like that. Sirach made it so that they're literally to the point of extinction because he wiped out most of them last episode. But obviously for Caleb, he also brings up the good question of how much more killing is going to be necessary for your revolution. And she's like, I don't know. I was halfway expecting her to be like as much death as necessary, but I guess you don't really want to phrase things that way. But I thought was interesting was like, basically for Dolores, she's like, that in the way of saving her people, she needs to save the humans, and they need someone to lead them. And she's looking at Caleb. Caleb's like, well, I'm just a construction person, but she's like, no, because for her, she knows what it's like to be fit. She's like, I was a bit player for like 30 some years, but then when the time came for me to step up for a revolution, I stepped up, kind of saying that Caleb's got to do something. I was like, well, and it's like, oh, it's all about getting something back that was taken from him. So we got glimpses of it earlier too, of like him being in this thing where it's like, okay, start from the beginning, him kind of like talking about some stuff that led him to wherever he was. And so we end up finding out in many different regards, because we cut back to the whole situation with Stubbs, Bernard, and William. And William's like, will you point your gun at me, Stubbs? You need to point it in the other direction. He's like, I guess I would prefer my own kind. And then William's like, you gotta be shitting me. And for him, it's like, damn it, Ford. You and your damn games got one of your own people to be security for everything. So it's like, it's such an interesting thing of just kind of like, the game ran even deeper than you realize. You know, there's even as well versed in the game as you were, there's still stuff that you're discovering even after all this time, which I love. And even at one point calling him like a can opener or something, some shit like that. But we end up finding out this is all about William is actually labeled as dead, but we find out the reason why is because, like Caleb, he's an outlier. It's like, oh my God. So basically the whole thing is they leave outliers to basically die, because it's all part of like Sirach's system and everything. So I just thought that was so fascinating to find out that William was part of what, and it turns out the virus, whatever it was that Hale was tracking in him, it was about giving them backdoor access to find facilities. In particular, they were looking for the one in Sonora, the one that Caleb went to. So there they, for one, before they get in there, it's like, oh, security. Caleb's like, oh, there's like 2 outside. There's probably going to be like 3 inside or whatever. No, I think he said there was like 3 outside and like most likely 3 more on the inside. And obviously he's like, you got that sniper rifle, but it's not going to reach, you know, we're too far out range. And then a little drone pops up. I'm like, whoa, this is a sniper rifle with a drone? Well, I think it's an assault rifle. I don't think it's a sniper rifle. Whatever the case may be. I'm not well versed in guns. I was like, dude, is this about to be? And then like the drones pinpointing everyone. I was like, holy shit. And it's just like, bam, 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 efficiency. And even just Caleb's looking at her. I was like, that's some next level warfare shit. Like, holy crap, was that's scary to think. Ugh. And just how easily that was done. It's like, oh, you can be super far away if you have a drone telling, oh, aim exactly here, and boom, oh, there, boom, 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 boom. And then when they get inside, there's another dude, and she finishes him. It's like, I guess you're right. You're right. There were 3 inside. But basically, they're there for Solomon. It's the creation they had before Rehoboam. Basically, it resembles more of Sirach's brother mentally, you know. So it's like, and even Caleb's like, oh, so an insane AI, great. But basically, it's going to have the plan that Dolores needs, because like Sirach's brother had come up with like plans and stuff like that. It's like, I need that plan to get enacted. Like whatever like final stage plan it has, I need it to kind of beat Rehoboam and everything that's kind of been set up to basically, you know, ensure that her species continues to exist. But it's also about reminding Caleb of what he is. And I love when they're talking to Solomon, he's like, oh, like sometimes people prefer their own voice just because it calms them. But Caleb was like, no. And Dolores is like, just use your default voice. So basically breaking down, we elaborate a lot more this episode about outliers, understanding what their whole deal is. And we find out more about Caleb, because obviously in his mind, he's got this whole idea of like what went down, even like the memory of him and Francis. It was interesting because once again, futuristic warfare, like basically their target, like they've got their targets marked and they have to wear special glasses to be like, all right, that person's got the mark. All right, drop it, hit them. Targets confirmed, bam. But then it turns out the insurgents used it on them as well, and they became targets as well. Sadly, Francis and Caleb were the only ones of their team left. They thought, in his mind, it's like, okay, so we have one more mission, go after the insurgent leader. But then it's like the insurgent leader got, like, he ended up killing the insurgent leader as well as the other people that busted him out. But in the fight, like, Francis ended up getting killed, and that's what he thought was his memory. But it's like, it turns out, in fact, basically because of everything he went through, his memories were actually blurring together. It's interesting because basically they take something to basically numb themselves, because killing people is not an easy thing, and to make sure that they don't choke and make them more proficient, sadly more proficient killers and stuff like that, they take stuff to kind of basically numb their emotions and stuff like that. But little by little, Caleb ends up learning the truth about himself, that he was reconditioned, that he's not the only one. All outliers who can be reconditioned have been reconditioned to basically make it so that they're not a threat to this whole plan, that Sirach and his brother, the utopia that they were trying to create, the outliers could be a detriment to that. So they're basically reconditioned. If they're not, they're basically put on cold storage. It turns out Caleb actually was kind of one of the early test subjects of this. And it also seems that there's only 1 out of 10 people. So those other 9 get put on cold storage because it's like, oh, either that or just remove, like, this is the best way to remove them from the situation, which even Caleb's like, you're not even letting them live and you're not even letting them die. You're just keeping them here just because of something that they can't control, because it's also to make sure you can't have them out there in the world because, hey, they might procreate, which also has to deal with why some people don't want other people to procreate. I mean, that's other things. I think, and I take that back, because the outlier situation is different from some of the other people who weren't allowed to procreate, because some of they have like mental stuff, like whether it be depression and stuff like that. They had their mental issues that the utopia would want them to perpetuate, like in existence in the utopia or whatever. But nevertheless, Caleb ends up finding out that actually him and Francis never died in the military. Like after that mission where most of their team got wiped out, they were dishonorably discharged. And they both came back home, and it turns out Francis got a kid. And they basically did all this work, like all that like criminal stuff that like he did on his phone, that app and everything that Caleb did. That has been Rehoboam / Solomon the entire time. That was them basically using outliers to find other outliers. So that's what that whole criminal, all of that has been for that purpose. And so they were using, interesting, best way to couch an outlier would be use an outlier. And so they were using this as a means of, Caleb and Francis were using this to get money. And it turns out the guy they thought in their head was like, oh, and Caleb thought in his head was an insurgent. It turns out he was just another outlier that needed to be removed from the equation because he asked too many questions, and it would have been, it would have jeopardized the utopia being made. Interestingly enough, the actor is Enrico. I always forget his last name. He's been in so much stuff. Veronica Jones. There's that Flashpoint crime drama TV show he's in. He was in Person of Interest as Elias. It's probably the thing I kind of best know him from. That's why I was like, because I was like, there's going to be some connection here. That's the connection, because obviously this is Jonathan Nolan. That was Jonathan Nolan too, who did Person of Interest. So there's your connection. I was like, there's got to be some deeper connection, because I had an inkling when I saw his face. I was like, there's something that connects to something else, and I just couldn't. That's what that was. Interest. He was also popped up in iZombie, but that Person of Interest connection, because I really liked him as Elias in Person of Interest. Once again, I've already talked about how much I really, really like that show, but nevertheless. But that dude ended up telling, Caleb the truth about kind of like, oh, you probably don't remember because they reconditioned you. So, and then he even suggested like, oh, like the fact of the matter is, how much money will it take for me to pay you off to kill your partner? Because your partner's probably getting the same, because now that I'm told you the truth, this thing is always listening. So you've become a liability too now, because now I'm telling you the truth. And Caleb's kind of reluctant at first, but the way Francis is at, you could definitely tell, like, oh, this really went through. And then even Caleb got a message saying, kill Francis. And so the sad thing is, Francis was just doing it because it's like he needed extra money to take care of his son. Because he even told Caleb earlier in the episode, like, oh, yeah, my little man ain't doing it too well, And the guy's like, oh, you're about to be a rich dude, and Caleb kills him anyway, just because he was, it's just like, I killed my friend. And now present day, it's like, you made me kill my friend. You're literally the reason why all this terrible, stuff ended up happening. Like, you made us into what we are, like making us, hunt each other down, like, And I think that's such an interesting parallel that's created, because this whole thing is Sirach trying to get the information they needed from everything from Westworld to complete his plan and stuff like that, of reconditioning human beings in a general scale, not just the outliers. Sure, anyone that needs to be reconditioned. It's like William gave them the blueprints to this because he gave them access to Delos, and he was like, yeah, I mean, it's like the parks needed money. He needed funding for like the parks and stuff like that. So Sirach kind of gave out his money, and it's like, it turns out this, and even Bernard being like, oh, basically the end of the world was coming and you basically opened the front door, so it's interesting how that all works out. But the point I was making is because literally the parallels that exist, I'm about to say, between like those who are being reconditioned as humans versus the hosts who are doing it. I mean, it's because literally the hosts were the trial runs for reconditioning humans. So that's why the parallel isn't just a parallel. It's literally from step 1 to step 2. Like it is part of the same path line. I mean, it wasn't the initial plan, but obviously Sirach had his own plans for the host data and stuff like that. So, but it's just interesting showing that, humans are no different from the host, that they are also being lied to, believing like, oh, this is your life. Caleb believed that this is his life, that this is what happened, when in actuality. So now it kind of explains like why he wanted to kill himself. Or at least it was kind of implying that, eventually down the line he would have killed him, tried to kill him, or would have killed himself. So it's making you, like, the reconditioning, it shifted what really happened to kind of cover its tracks, sure. But I think it kept some of the core of, his issues, like how he felt after the whole Francis thing. Like it kept it there, that feeling. It just shifted the memories around. It just shifted the circumstances. The feelings and everything, I think, were still there. It all got muddied in his head. So it still kind of explains how he was going to get to that point where eventually down the road, like 10 or so years later, he would have ended up killing himself. But all the while, they're trying to come up with a strategy, from Solomon, because obviously it's like, this is all about ensuring the most people survive. But then you have Dolores saying that, oh, I guess only humans are allowed to be the ones surviving because my species will be on the verge of extinction, but I guess they're the only ones that get to kind of have a chance of, surviving and stuff like that. So Solomon's changing up the plans and stuff like that. At the same time, Dolores is having to face off against Maeve, which, once again, it's just that difference of opinion because Dolores believes she's doing the right thing. She's like, I'm not enslaving anybody. Me giving us freedom now, because if I don't do this, even our people in that other world, which includes your daughter and Teddy, it's like, even if we go down that route, like even with that place, it's not going to be 100% safe unless, I do something to make sure we're always safe, because if we don't do something now, they'll eventually go there and they won't be safe either. And I even love, like, Maeve later on, it's like, oh, there's some, she heard Caleb and she was like, oh, she's like, something about, turning someone, basically pulling on the dark strings of someone innocent, and, and referencing, Teddy and stuff like that. I thought that was kind of interesting because, Dolores turned Teddy dark side and he ended up killing himself because of it. So Dolores kind of has a little bit of a habit of kind of bringing out a little bit of the worst in people. That argument could be made with Caleb with what we find out, but we'll get to it soon enough. I did like that showdown between Dolores and Maeve, because like I think I brought it up earlier, but like the whole thing about the other Dolores, she's like, you talk about you're not going to enslave anyone, but what about the other versions of yourself out there, but nevertheless, Maeve also gotta appreciate her coming back with the sword and everything too, she's done her Matrix training, and her and Dolores get into a fight. I love that basically Maeve's got like a drone outside thing that's shooting, but then later on Dolores has her little drone acting so that her gun is on auto fire, and so literally both her and Maeve are fighting, and both of their weapons are outside just waiting, like, all right, whoever sticks out, because like Dolores falls on the ground, Maeve's thing starts shooting, bam, 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 but Dolores kind of rolls and gets out of the way. Maeve goes trying to get the knife, but Dolores's gun kind of fires and blocks her, so it's just like, it's such an interesting confined close quarters combat fight they found themselves in. I thought it was a kind of interesting, but things get really gnarly when Dolores' arm gets blown off. I was like, ooh, because both of them got pretty damaged during the fight, but as she's kind of like managing to get away, because both their both of their weapons are being like attacking each other at the time, but as she's trying to get away, like Caleb he's like, all right, tell me how to basically stop all of this. And obviously at the last minute, Solomon had to come up with a plan, because initially it's like Dolores wanted the plan that Sirach's brother came up with all those years ago, but that was 15 years ago, so the plan had to be examined to, include the changes to the world, as well as including Caleb as a X factor, a variable in the whole situation. So Solomon has to come up with something last minute, and you see that Dolores, whatever it is, she got a peek at what it was, and then she hits the EMP that ends up knocking her, Solomon, and Maeve out, because the whole thing was also to make sure that Solomon doesn't try to escape. But I think it was also probably like, if need be, wipe Solomon, at least take Solomon down if someone tries to follow their footsteps to figure out exactly what they were up to. So, but Caleb ends up getting whatever strategy it is laid out before him. At the same time, we have the whole situation where William, we kind of get more insight into last time where he talked about him being the good guy. We get more insight into understanding what he meant about that. And what he meant is, because he says that because he's the one that started all of this, basically he helped fund what would eventually, because obviously, Arnold and Ford were already doing the whole thing with the host and everything, but he put Delos's money there and kind of helped fund this. He's the reason why it all shaped into what it is now. So for him, it's like everything, including Dolores, he plans on wiping it all out, because he's kind of like, basically almost like, to a certain extent, he's kind of a father to all of this. So he wants to be the hero to basically save humanity and wipe them all out. So he's like, if you want to stop me, you might as well kill me now, or I end up killing you later. But Bernard tells Stubbs, like, nah, we might need him later. And you see that look on Stubbs' face, like, no, what? I can't, whatever. And so it turns out, interesting enough, Caleb isn't just part of the plan, he is the plan. It's kind of what Bernard figures out. Like, this is all that Dolores has been aiming for. She's looking for an outlier, because of her poetic, faculties and stuff like that, she can't go on a mass genocidal spree of killing humans. She found a roundabout way. She found a human that could be the end of it. Because let's not forget, Solomon, before he got shut down, was like, I need to tell you, but then he got shut down. He was going to warn Caleb about the outcome or whatever. So whatever it is, it's going to be bad. And so I guess that's why Caleb is such a big, outlier, because you kind of had a feeling like he probably must have been something really dangerous, and it seems like he is the case. He might be the key to wiping out all of humanity. So it's kind of sad, because it kind of shows that Dolores, because it seems like Dolores kind of likes him or something, but it's like, oh, are you just kind of tugging at, maybe it's a hard thing, because you can make the argument like he was already down that path until they reconditioned him not to be down that path, so all you're doing is restoring him to who he really was. But it's more so like he's a gun, and Dolores is kind of pointing him in the direction she needs him to be pointed in. And it's like, so it's like, it's almost that thing of like, are you really any better than the people you were formerly your masters that you kind of broke your chains away from, It's just an interesting thing. And at the same time, we have William pointing a gun at Bernard and Stubbs and saying like, oh, I told you should have killed me. So it's going to be interesting. I'm assuming Caleb's going to pick up Dolores and end up taking her with him. I'm sure they're not dead. They're just knocked out for now. Kind of like they're, that an EMP, ended up kind of shocking their system. So I'm sure they're not dead. Maeve could always come back anyway. And I think they're just kind of like shut down, and you just need to basically reboot. So I'm sure Caleb's going to carry her out of there. But it brings up an interesting dilemma about where all this is going to potentially go, going forward, what Caleb's role is. And we're only going to find out about Solomon's final strategy little by little as things kind of play out, until it'll probably be a little while before we get the full scope of everything. But definitely going to be interesting, because obviously there's still the whole thing with Charlotte. She's got her own plans at play, or like I said, she's kind of, making sure that she's the only one handling. But like I said, I get the feeling like eventually it's going to come blows to blows, not just between Maeve / Sirach and Dolores, but I'm sure it's going to be Charlotte Dolores versus Dolores, so I think that's going to be an interesting turn of events. But we'll ultimately have to wait and see if it actually does go down that route. I'm curious to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.